back, my next guest knows a thing or two about prosecuting the case against Donald Trump. Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff was a House impeachment manager for Trump's first impeachment trial. He also served on the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th insurrection. The congressman is now a candidate for U.S. Senate in California. Congressman Schiff, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I want to start with the response of Speaker Kevin McCarthy to the news of Trump's indictment. Soon after the news broke, he sent out a tweet. And in that tweet, he accused Alvin Bragg, the Manhattan district attorney, of weaponizing our sacred system of justice against President Trump. He also said that the House of Representatives will hold Alvin Bragg and his unprecedented abuse of power to account. You've known him a long time as a fellow member of Congress from California. What do you think is motivating him in this moment?
Well, I think what's motivating him is he senses the base of the Republican Party is still with Donald Trump, and therefore he's still going to be with Donald Trump. He's doing what he and Jim Jordan and others did during the impeachment proceedings, and that is act as a kind of surrogate criminal defense team for Donald Trump, run interference for him. In this case, tried to interfere with the Manhattan District Attorney prosecution. That, of course, is not the role of Congress. What he should be doing as Speaker is uplifting the justice system, saying, let the jury decide, let the prosecution prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt if it can, refrain from violence. This is what any responsible speaker would say. But you know, sadly, under Donald Trump, the Republican Party in Congress has become this kind of cult around his personality and shredding any devotion it once had to the rule of law.
Now, Governor Ron DeSantis, another leading Republican, also used some similar language in calling the indictment the weaponization of the legal system. We saw that language over and over again in the responses of a number of Republicans. He also called Alvin Bragg a, quote, Soros-backed Manhattan prosecutor. What did that statement say to you about Ron DeSantis?
Well, it says that Ron DeSantis will say anything, do anything in the hopes of becoming president. It says also a lot about the state of the GOP, and that is you have to attack the justice system. You have to speculate about motives. You have to assume the worst. And in that statement as well, you have to disregard the law. Say you won't extradite someone accused of crime in order to be competitive in the Republican primary. He goes beyond that and tries to tie George Soros to this, which is, you know, this not so thinly veiled anti-Semitic element that is very popular within certain portions of Trump's base. And how despicable is that this is what's necessary to compete. But I think that's where he is. He feels the base is still with Donald Trump, and he needs to appeal to them.
Yeah, that anti-Semitic trope is something we've seen over and over again in their responses. Now, you're a Harvard Law School graduate. So is Governor DeSantis. I know you probably took some similar classes. Did you see that? And have you seen some of his comments and think he probably knows better about the law?
He certainly knows better about the law. He knows what his obligation is to extradite someone who is accused of crime in another state. He's not a stupid person. He understands this very well. But one thing he also understands is what's the path to power in the GOP. And the path to power is now catering to the lowest common denominator. That's, I think, a terrible use of his legal education. It is, you know, putting ambition over any other principle, scruple. Nothing else matters except ambition. You know, I'm reminded of something Adam Kinzinger, my colleague on the January 6th committee, said when he said it's not that he and Liz Cheney are so courageous, it's just that they're surrounded by cowards. And this is a kind of a cowardly action by Ron DeSantis to try to compete with Donald Trump on Trump's own turf.
Now, you have, in addition to the Manhattan District Attorney's case and the indictment this week, there are 3 other criminal cases. And you've said that the Justice Department has been too slow in investigating Trump for his role in the January 6th insurrection, and that the DOJ should have been first to bring charges on that, or that would have been preferable, I should say. Why do you think the DOJ has not been faster in its investigation and really coming to a conclusion in that case?
I think the Justice Department is responding to how badly politicized the department was under Bill Barr, someone who interfered to try to stop the case that is now being brought in Manhattan to stop the Southern District of New York, the federal prosecutors from proceeding with that case. Someone intervened to make the sentence against Roger Stone become less, to make the case against Mike Flynn, another person who lied to cover up for Donald Trump, go away completely. After that kind of terrible politicization, I think Merrick Garland laudably wants to reestablish the department's reputation for independence. And while that's laudable, if you take it too far, it confers a kind of immunity on the former president. And so I think they were very slow to go after anyone except the foot soldiers who broke into the Capitol and beat the police officers that day. The Congress, oddly enough, was way ahead in the investigation of the multiple lines of effort by Donald Trump and others to overturn the election. And given how cumbersome Congress is, you don't expect Congress to be ahead of the Justice Department, but we were, and they've been playing catch up for the last year and a half. I think they're coming to, hopefully, to a conclusion one way or another. And the hiring of special counsel, I think, was very important. But I think they were loath to cause any controversy, and that meant they avoided taking steps they should have taken a long time ago.
Now, they named that special counsel, Jack Smith, back in November. From what you've seen from your vantage point, and you do sure know a lot about all of the information that's out there on January 6th and Trump's role, do you think he's up to the job? And has you seen a difference in the speed since he was named to that role?
I think we've seen a big difference. This is a new, I think, level of aggressiveness and urgency at the Justice Department. There were a great many witnesses who simply refused to testify before the January 6th committee. People like Mike Pence, people like Mark Meadows. They evidently felt they could tell the story to the public through their book, but they couldn't tell Congress, which was a tremendous disservice to the Congress and to the country. But now the special counsel is bringing them before the grand jury. He's litigating these false claims of privilege. He's winning in court. And this may be some of the most important testimony, because these are the people around Donald Trump who are best able to testify as to his intention, his culpability, what his mental state was, what he understood and when he understood it. So I think these are some of the most important grand jury sessions, and they typically take place with the most significant witnesses towards the end of an investigation.
Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you so much for joining me this morning.